The Ravens beat the Bucs on Monday Night Football 41-31. Next up, Cleveland Browns. Can the Ravens make it 6 straight wins? We touch on that and more next on Ravens Talk. Five straight wins for the Baltimore Ravens, defeating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Monday Night Football. Keep pace with the Pittsburgh Steelers atop the AFC North. Up next, a division opponent in the Cleveland Browns, who are going the opposite direction. Welcome to Ravens Talk. I'm your host, Samuel Njoku. We'll talk all about that Ravens win. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, like I mentioned, not up to snuff with the Baltimore Ravens. Touch on that, the things I like, things I did not like. Talk about the Cleveland Browns. They're up next. Second division opponent for the Ravens so far in 2024. Some trades happen in the National Football League. We'll touch about how that may affect the Baltimore Ravens and what they do as the trade deadline approaches. But first, Ravens get it done. Ravens do what they have to do what they've been doing since that loss to the Oakland Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders, I should say, in week 2. More of the same. More of the same. I think we have a pretty good idea of who the Ravens are, and that's a dominant run team. But the star of the show wasn't Derrick Henry. It was Lamar Jackson, but not in the aspect in which many had originally thought. Lamar Jackson gets it done with his arm. I mean, 5 touchdowns. We all know what Lamar Jackson does in primetime television. 5 touchdown passes, 0 interceptions. He's as good as a passer as he is a rusher, and that is saying quite a bit. He is creeping towards the most rushing yards for a quarterback in NFL history. I mean, what more can you say about what this Ravens team has done? Slow start. I wouldn't even say a slow start to this season because the Ravens went toe-to-toe with the Super Bowl champions. Now, you got to consider week 1 was really a preseason game for the Ravens. I mean, none of the starters had ever played in the preseason, limited action in practice. It just didn't seem like the Ravens were getting into that groove. Couple that with the inexperience with the offensive line. Remember, at the time, Patrick McCarry was playing at right tackle. Daniel Falele, first starter right guard. A lot of stuff was going on. Andrew Voorhees was the left guard. So this isn't the same offensive line that we saw in week 1. And this team is starting to gel, starting to understand where they stand as far as offensive personnel, decisions being made during critical moments. So this is not the same team as we saw in week 1. Week 2, we saw more of the same. The inexperience of the offensive line, the lack of push from the offense to continue to pound on the opposing team. All that coupled to a late game loss to the Las Vegas Raiders in week 2. And after that game, you saw Lamar Jackson voice his frustration, saying we need to continue to attack these teams. And the Ravens have not looked back since then. Winning 5 straight games, this team is a completely different team than the one we saw on September 1st. And it's nice to watch. If you're a Ravens fan, of course, you're loving it. As someone who loves to watch film after the game, it's just very impressive, the growth of the team, even within the first 7 weeks of the season. Very nice to see. So let's touch on what we saw in the Bucs game. Derrick Henry was stymied early. We talked about that last week. The Bucs love to run a loaded box. They're very comfortable running this loaded box, and so they used that to their advantage, slowing Derrick Henry down. Lamar Jackson said, okay, well, if you're going to do that, watch me work. And boy, did he. That's first tossed, that dime to the bucket of Charlie Kolar in the corner of the sideline, over top the defender, definitely just showed me what we were to expect from this team on Monday Night Football. Lots of throws being made by Lamar Jackson, lots of reads. He knew when to tuck in and run when he had to. He was just taking what the defense gave him, something that we saw in the AFC Championship game was not the case. I think after that AFC Championship game, Lamar Jackson decided, look, call me a running back if you want to. Call me a quarterback if you have to. I'm doing whatever it takes to win. And boy, has he delivered. Definitely the number one. I guess as of now, you consider him to be MVP of the league. And if he continues on this trend, there's no one that's going to supplant him in that regard. I think Jared Goff may be the only one really pushing for that spot. But boy, it is nice to see this offense firing all cylinders. And nice to see Rashod Bateman much maligned Rashod Bateman. We talked about this during the offseason, what the absence of Odell Beckham would mean for Rashod Bateman. I said it and I pounded on it and people were rolling their eyes. Odell Beckham took a lot of what Rashod Bateman did away from the table. A lot of the plays that were designed for Odell Beckham could have been designed for Rashod Bateman. You're starting to see that. With his absence, Rashod Bateman clearly the number 2 receiver in this offense. In some aspects, maybe the number 1 receiver on this offense, depending on who you're talking to. He is definitely getting open. The plays are starting to be designed towards him. You're starting to see looks go his way. First reads, second reads towards Rashod Bateman, and he's taking advantage. That 49-yard pass was a thing of beauty, both in aspects of play design, pocket presence, and route running by Rashod Bateman. All 3 aspects were perfect. When all those 3 comes together, you get a touchdown, and that's what we saw from the Ravens offense. Let's pivot now. Pivot to the Ravens defense, who continues to struggle. Now, I will lean back a bit and say the Ravens, for the first 3.5 quarters, played great football. The Mike Evans touchdown was a bit of a miscommunication. John Harbaugh touched on it, called it a cover 2 beater. I'm not so sure. See 2 verts on one side a lot in this league, especially doing cover 2s. It is a cover 2 beater, but if you're the cornerback, you have to understand what the opposing offense is trying to do and play your man, especially if that man is number 13, Mike Evans. So there's still things the Ravens defense needs to work on, but overall, I liked what I saw. They were more aggressive, a lot more press coverage, using the size of Marlon Humphrey, using the speed of Nate Wiggins to your advantage. You don't need to be 10 yards back of the line of scrimmage when you have a speedy cornerback by Nate Wiggins. You don't have to be soft in coverage when you have a big body corner like Marlon Humphrey who can bump you and disrupt your route. That's the type of defense we need to see moving forward. The last piece is the communication, and we're in week 8. We're still having this concept, this talk about communication issues. So a lot of that is the inexperience of Zach Orr. Let's just call a spade, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. But overall, I like what I saw from the game plan for the defense. Do not be afraid. The Bucs had Chris Godwin, who unfortunately went down with an injury and is likely out for the season. We saw the injury to Mike Evans as well, but those 2 in the beginning of the game were a presence that the Ravens had to account for, along with Baker Mayfield, who is playing one of the better games of his young career. So it's very difficult as a defense to decide to press up, but I think they have the talent to do that. And because of this shift from Mike McDonald's philosophy to Zach Orr, and there is a shift. They aren't the same DC. You have to be able to be that aggressive defense, and you have to be able to set the tone along with your offense, because if this defense can be 3/4 as good as they were last year, no one's beating them. I mean, I don't think that's a hot take. This team is good as ever, and of course, I think this team will go where the offense goes, but if this defense can put it together 60 minutes, there's no stopping them. They won't lose another game. Let's move on. When we come back, we'll touch on the Cleveland Browns. In fact, no, but before we do that, we're going to touch on some trade rumors that have been going on. A lot of trades have been made. I think you guys know what I'm talking about in the AFC. We'll touch on that, and we'll touch on what the Ravens may need to do to compete with that, or if they have to at all. Next on Ravens Talk. Welcome back to Ravens Talk. As you mentioned, the Ravens defeated the Bucs 41-31. A game in which sounds like it was close, but not really. Ravens were up 41-16, I believe. A few minutes to go in the game before the Bucs went and came back. The onside kick and the touchdown to Rashod White. Pretty much a blown coverage, if you will, in the middle of the field. So not really the performance that you would think by looking at the scoreboard. The Ravens dominated. Because of that, I believe there were some reverberations throughout the National Football League. And the one that stands out is that Kansas City Chiefs acquired DeAndre Hopkins from the Tennessee Titans. I believe some of that has to do with what the Ravens are doing. I know the Chiefs are undefeated, but the Ravens are by far clearly the best team in the league. And if the Chiefs would have shot at a three-peat, they cannot have the offensive output that they have had during the first 7 games of the season. Now, Patrick Mahomes hasn't looked that great. 6 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. I know he's the quote-unquote GOAT in the current generation of NFL quarterbacks, but he has struggled. A lot of that in his defense has to do with the fact that he has to push the agenda a little bit. He has to make the pass that he normally wouldn't make in order to squeeze it in. So a receiver group that is failing to get separation. The defense is holding their own. For the Chiefs are being led by their defense, something that Ravens fans are not unaccustomed to. So Ravens fans know that Chiefs are reeling right now. It's a great opportunity, even though the Chiefs beat the Ravens in week 1, and we touched on it. This is not the same team that the Chiefs played in week 1. The Chiefs are not the same team that the Ravens played in week 1 either. Rice is down. Worthy has shown that he can be beat in press coverage. Travis Kelce looks as he has lost a step this last year. He's leaning towards the end of his career. Not to say that Kelce isn't great. He still is, but he's not the same guy. All these things are accumulating for the Chiefs, and they need to make a move. So they made the move for DeAndre Hopkins, move that some fans thought the Ravens could be making themselves, and I'm not saying that's the case. I don't think they should have. But the Chiefs make that move, and it automatically makes them a better football team. How much? I don't know. DeAndre Hopkins, is he the same guy? He's in his mid-30s right now. Lost a step or two, but he's better than what the Chiefs had out there right now. The reason why I bring the Chiefs up on the Ravens Talk podcast is because I truly believe, even though the Chiefs have, for all intents and purposes, a 3-game lead on the Ravens very much can still obtain that 1 seed. The Ravens may not have another loss this year, and that is because of that offense. And if the Chiefs want to keep up with them, even though they still have big games upcoming against the Bills and the Steelers themselves, they need to get something going. So I think this is a desperation move by the Chiefs in order to stay relevant. I think the defense is doing the best they can. They did handle the 49ers, even though the 49ers were without a lot of pieces, including Ayuk, who went down. He's gone for the year. Chiefs are not the same team. I know they're the boogeyman of the National Football League, being back-to-back champions, but they need to make these moves. The question is, do the Ravens need to make moves? Are the Ravens in a position where they believe they maybe should take a look at some talent? Trade rumors are running amok on social media. Of course, the Ravens have issues on defense. We touched on it. Pass rush could be an area of focus. Just about communication being an issue. Something can be made that the Ravens aren't getting a lot of pressure from their front four as in years past. I believe last year the Ravens were top 5 in terms of being able to pressure the quarterback with only 4 people. More of a simulated pressure that we talked about with Michael McDonald. But now this year, they're in the bottom of the league in terms of being able to gain pressure with only 4 men. So they're blitzing a lot. They're still 4th in the league in sacks currently. They're still able to get to the quarterback, but it takes pressure from either DBs or linebackers in order to get that accomplished. Front 4 is not able to do it by themselves. That leaves a lot of guys in one-on-one coverage on the back end, and that's why communication is so key. Because if you leave a guy open, there's not much help coming because they're going after the quarterback, and being able to do that is going to be paramount for the Ravens. So a lot of people are thinking about maybe perhaps bringing in a pass rusher. Darius Smith is the guy I've heard. Jadeveon Clowney, bringing him back. You heard Max Crosby, and the Raiders have already gone on record, including Crosby, that he will not be traded, so you can cancel that. Myles Garrett, basically we'll see this week for the Ravens as an option, but he's an AFC North guy. The Browns would be foolish to trade him to an opponent. Obviously, the Browns would be foolish to pay a quarterback who is allegedly a part of lots of sexual misconduct and giving him a full contract with fully guaranteed money, but that happened. So I won't say that the Browns are foolish enough not to do it. We'll see. But I would say the Ravens should stand pat. I mean, there's a reason why these other teams are making moves, because they're trying to catch up to the Ravens. I know the Ravens have 2 losses, but this is the eye test. The Ravens currently are on the trajectory to make the playoffs. And once they're in the playoffs, it doesn't matter what your record is. If you're trying to be a formidable opponent for this Baltimore Ravens team, which clearly by far the best team in the league, you need to make those moves. So the Bills made the move for Amari Cooper. They brought him in. So they got him. The Jets brought in Devontae Adams. Who knows why? The Jets stink. But these teams are starting to make moves, and I'm sure Ravens fans get antsy as we approach the trade deadline. We're about over a week away from that deadline, which is November 5th. So the Ravens need to do their best to figure out, are they going to make that move? Will I be opposed to the Ravens making a move for a pass rusher? No. I mean, the more pass rush you can get, the better. But understand that when you're bringing in these guys, these high value contracts, you're disrupting your future. There are plenty of guys. You've seen what Rashod Bateman's able to do. You don't think Rashod Bateman's going to win another contract if he continues to perform at this level? Tyler Linderbaum, top 3 centers in the league already. I think we can all agree on that. Zay Flowers, the guy who's performing well. Isaiah Likely, he's coming up on a deal soon. Kyle Hamilton. I mean, we touch on this all the time. You guys, you want to keep your men in-house. You don't want to have guys going to other cities. Patrick Queen's a guy who left for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Has he had a great year? No, but you can see that the inside of this defense has struggled in pass protection, pass coverage. And some of that has to do with the loss of Patrick Queen. You hate to say it. The Ravens are playing a lot more dime this year, which means Roquan Smith is usually by himself in the middle of the field, cover it up. And the Ravens typically run nickel. Having that second linebacker out there to be there to help cover the middle of the field. So I don't know. I don't know what the Ravens' plans are going to be. I think that pass rusher would be the move to make if you make it, but I'm cool with standing pat. This team will go as far as the offense goes, and you just hope within the next 10 weeks of the season, the Ravens get it together on defense enough where they're not bottom of the league. Right now, the Ravens rank dead last pass defense. They're ranked first in rushing, and there are no shortage of attempts. It's not like the Ravens are first in rush defense because the Ravens aren't receiving a lot of rush attempts from the opposing team. Teams are trying to run the football on them. It's just not working. The passing is the only way to go for these teams, and they're finding success a lot of times due to miscommunication. Will the pass rush help with that? It would. But how much are you willing to mortgage your future, draft picks, cap space to do that when right now you're clearly the best team in the league? Do you want to keep pace with these other teams making moves? Sure. But I think the Ravens are going to trust the guys they have, and I would be surprised if a move is made unless it's one that's a no-brainer move as far as compensation goes on the Ravens' end. So that's my thoughts on it. When we get back, we'll talk about the Cleveland Browns. AFC North foe, a team that the Ravens are very familiar with. They split the series last year. The Ravens are going to Cleveland and try and get their first dub against the Cleveland Browns this season. We'll touch on that next on Ravens Talk.
I got to get that fixed because that's been happening too often. It's been a couple miscommunication, and there's been a couple things that I can help those guys out with, trying to get to some exotic looks. Teams are not letting us trying to get into that, trying to speed break and get back out fast to the flat. So that's an easy fix, and we anticipate teams are going to continue to do that. So, great.
Of course, that was Zach Orr, defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens, giving us his thoughts on the Ravens defense, what they may need to do in order to improve it. It's right there. I mean, it's not much to talk about. I mean, I could sit here and go over the film and tell you what the Ravens need to do. And it's like he said, it's just communication. I mean, there are other things as far as when to call certain plays. I think calling the cover 2 when the team is inside the opponent's 30, being the Ravens territory, may not be the best move, especially considering that the Ravens didn't run a lot of cover 2 so far this season. But for the most part, just know your assignment. Know what the other team is doing. Know what your compadres are doing. And I think the Ravens will be fine. That's why we're just waiting to see it all click together. May not be a better time than this game. Cleveland Browns, disastrous start to the season. Only one win to show it for themselves so far. Deshaun Watson, down with an Achilles rupture, tear, what have you. He's done for the season. A lot of drama associated with that we won't touch on. But Deshaun Watson's gone. DTR not playing. Jameis Winston will be the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns against the Baltimore Ravens this Sunday. There's also other things to talk about because Stefanski, the head coach for the Browns, told us that he's going to be relinquishing play calling duties to Ken Dorsey. He was the offensive coordinator for the Browns. He will be calling plays moving forward for the rest of the season. His first test, Ravens defense that is reeling in some aspects. In other aspects, doing better than anyone as far as rush defense goes. So it'll be very interesting to see how the Ravens combat this attack from the Browns with a new quarterback, new play caller. It's going to be very different. Zach Orr, again, we mention it all the time, doesn't have a lot of experience with this. Not a lot of film to go off of. Winston's never played quarterback for the Browns before. Dorsey hasn't called plays for the Browns before as far as being that guy with Winston. A lot of unknowns in this game. So it's very hard to predict the outcome as far as what the Browns do. What do we know? The Browns got Nick Chubb back. He looked okay. He just came off a major knee construction, so there's going to be some growing pains for the Browns. The Browns just traded Amari Cooper. So one less elite receiver for the Ravens to worry about. In fact, their number one receiver is Jerry Jeudy, who they acquired from the Broncos. Case can be made that he hasn't really been the receiver that the Browns hoped that they would have for him, but he'll have his opportunity with a new quarterback to kind of get things going. The Ravens have struggled against teams with elite passing attacks. Will the Browns be considered that team with the passing attack? No. They don't have that passing attack. I think they'll lean heavily on their running backs. Nick Chubb, I think Ford will make a go at it. I'm not sure if he'll actually play this week, but he'll be attempting to do so. Will that be enough to stop this Ravens team? I don't think so. I think the run defense will be too much to stop. I think you're asking a lot of Winston in his first start. Winston's going to sling it. Let's be very frank with that. Winston is not going to be afraid to throw that football. He knows that he has his teammates on his back. This team is going to play spoiler, try and even redirect their season in such a way. I think everyone can say that Watson was not a very good quarterback for the Browns this year. Winston is an upgrade. I mean, we have to assume that, right? He's a quarterback in this league. I think Watson was so bad that a case has to be made that Winston is in some aspects better. And so they will take their chances, I think. They have nothing to lose. It's a very desperate AFC North foe, a team that the Ravens are familiar with, and a team the Browns are familiar with in terms of the Ravens. So familiarity is very important when analyzing this matchup. I still think that the Ravens defense comes and plays. Marlon Humphrey dealing with an injury. He didn't practice on Wednesday or Thursday, so his likelihood of playing in this game is likely doubtful. Zay Flowers dealing with an ankle injury. When we touch on the offense, he hasn't practiced either, so I doubt that Zay Flowers plays either. But Nate Wiggins did return to practice on Thursday, and TJ Tampa may get the start. I don't know. It's looking like it's going to be Brandon Stevens and maybe Nate Wiggins. I think we're going to see some flux. Arthur Marlette is returning. And I think that core of cornerback is good enough. Rest those guys and get them ready for the next game. The Ravens will be fine with these corners against passing attack that hasn't shown much. Of course, again, as mentioned, new play caller, new quarterback, anything can happen, but I think the Ravens are very comfortable with the guys they have on the field against this roster, at least for this game. Touched a little bit about the offense, but let's push the focus there for sure. Ravens offense is just firing all cylinders. They're amazing. I mean, started during the Bucs game. We've seen it pretty much the entire season. It's gained national media attention. They're talking to town, the Baltimore Ravens, led by Lamar Jackson, and it's going to be potentially more of the same. Now, there are things about this defense that we need to take in consideration. I mentioned the first thing being familiarity. The Browns know how the Ravens work. They've played them twice a year. Same with the Bengals, even though the Bengals struggled, but their defense is not nearly as good as the Browns. Browns have Myles Garrett. I mean, he was the runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year last year. Actually, did he get it? No, he did get Defensive Player of the Year, actually. I thought it would be TJ Watt, but, that's politics or whatever. But Myles Garrett definitely is a force. It'll be interesting to see how the Browns play the Ravens with Myles Garrett. Now, Ravens also had to deal with the fact that the Browns run the most loaded box in the league. They load the box, and they do it effectively. Are they a great run defense? They're okay. They're not the top of the league. They're not the Ravens in any regard, but they do load the box. They do know how to play that type of football. So that's one thing that the Ravens have to deal with. The Ravens also have to deal with the fact that the Browns blitz a lot. They blitz. They are third in terms of blitz rate. Lamar Jackson kills blitzes. So it will take, I think, exotic style of blitz to really fool Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar Jackson has mentioned that he has taken a lot of consideration into learning how to pick up blitzes, something that he really takes into account because he knows the issue with the blitz and the goal of the blitz is to push the offense back, and Lamar's always about pushing forward. So he's done a good job this season of attacking the blitz, and I think the Browns will have to be very careful how they decide to blitz. Here's another issue with the Browns. The Browns run man coverage a lot. They run the most man coverage in the league. In fact, second team that runs the most man coverage are the Broncos, or the Ravens see the next week. Do you want to play man coverage against Lamar Jackson? Probably not. The Bucs run a lot of zone coverage. You mentioned it last week. They run the most zone coverage in the league. They got killed. Browns run the most man coverage. They're going to get ran. I expect a lot of rushing yards for Lamar Jackson if the Browns do continue that approach. I don't know how you don't continue that approach. A lot of things we talk about on the show, tendencies. what are the defenses comfortable doing on any given Sunday, and how much are teams willing to back away from those tendencies in order to combat the Ravens offense. When it's all said and done, you are who you are. So if you run a lot of zone or run a lot of man, I expect you to run a lot of zone or run a lot of man. In this case, the Browns run a lot of man, so I expect the Browns to continue that effect. I don't think they will shy away from that, especially when they have a team as the Ravens, who they have to see a lot. So I think the Browns are in trouble here. I really do. I think Myles Garrett is the X factor. If they can get things going with Myles Garrett and use him the way I expected the Cowboys to use Micah Parsons, the way the Raiders ended up using Max Crosby, then it could be very difficult. You saw Rosengarten struggle a little bit against the Bucs, not too much. Daniel Faalele continues to be a stalwart for this offensive line, which is nuts. And again, I told you guys I would give my formal apology to John Harbaugh after that Pittsburgh Steelers game, after I see what this line does against TJ Watt. But for now, it's been smooth sailing for the Ravens in terms of that offensive line. So I expect the Ravens to do well. Could be a struggle for the Browns. I think in order to combat this team, and then I touched on this on the AFC North Roundtable, a show in which I'm now an official participant of, along with a couple of guys across the AFC North, Zim with the Bengals, Zay with the Browns, and Mark with the Steelers. So make sure you guys tune into that show if you haven't already. Touched on it. To beat this Ravens team, you need to be able to, one, pass the football effectively, and two, not be terrified when the Ravens put up points early and often. You have to be able to comfortably sit in the pocket, take the blitzes, take the pressure that comes with having to come back from 10 down. Something the Ravens have to do recently. We know Lamar Jackson's able to do that. We've seen it from Joe Burrow. We know Patrick Mahomes can do that. Aren't a lot of other quarterbacks in the league that have that capability. And Jameis Winston, even though he has we've seen flashes of Winston in the past, do we know if Winston's that guy to be able to come back from 10 down, 14 down in order to defeat a Ravens team that is literally firing on all cylinders, at least on offense? We'll see. Let me get back. We'll get my final thoughts about the Ravens game. Give me my score prediction. Let you guys off as we get ready for the Ravens versus Browns Sunday. I mean, it's not a Sunday night football game. It's a 1 o'clock game, given the record of the opponent and why. We'll touch on the score prediction and close things out here next on Ravens Talk. Welcome back to Ravens Talk. Again, we touched on it. The Ravens and Browns are meeting in Cleveland. Huge game for the Browns. Pretty much the deciding factor of whether or not this team has any shot at making the postseason. And on the Ravens side, you have a team trying to keep pace. Pittsburgh Steelers, who have continued to find ways to win, fight the level of play from their offense. And know the offense of the Steelers have put up some points, but for all intents and purposes, this is a team that is not very good on offense and stalwart on the defensive side of the ball. That team, much like the Chiefs, are being moved forward by their defensive play. Shout outs to what those defensive coordinators have been able to do. But Ravens side, for the first time in a long time, all about the offense, and by Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. So what are my predictions for this game? We touched on it. The offense for the Browns is an enigma. It's an unknown. We don't know exactly what we're going to get. Nick Chubb just got back from knee surgery. Is he going to be the same back that we've seen in previous years for Baltimore? Nick Chubb is one of the few running backs that have had success for the Ravens, against the Ravens, despite how great they have been on run defense. But he's still dealing with a knee injury, I believe. Just getting back. New quarterback, new OC. The defensive side of the ball, you do have Myles Garrett, but Browns haven't been that great in pass D, even though they held their own against the Bengals. Again, familiarity plays a part in these division matchups. I just don't see the Browns getting their second win of the season against the best team in the National Football League. Anything can happen. It is any given Sunday. We've seen it. I've definitely talked about how the Ravens have lost some games that they should have won. Week 2 comes to mind. Browns could show up. Winston could be that guy, get a second chance at a starting quarterback spot and seizes the moment. But I just don't see it. Not against this team. Even the Ravens winning this game 34-10. It's going to be a pretty big win for the Ravens. Could be wrong. Again, I say this every week. I could be wrong. This is not a guarantee. If you're a wrestling fan, in the words of Paul Heyman, this is not a spoiler alert. This is just my prediction based on what I've seen on film. Again, the unknown, the offense coordinator being a play caller now and the new QB coming in definitely gives me some hesitation in terms of pounding my table and declaration of a Ravens win, but I'm pretty confident going into this one that the Ravens will pick up a 6th win in the season. If they don't, we'll definitely be talking about it. That's going to do it for this era Ravens Talk. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Big win on Monday Night Football. Short week for the Ravens. A little banged up heading into this matchup, but I think the Ravens definitely still have what it takes to get the job done. Win or lose, we'll talk about it, we'll analyze it, we'll decipher it. Thank you so much for all the people that have been following me on social media and all the people that have tuned in on the AFC Roundtable that have watched it. Criticized my commentary a little bit as far as me being an advocate for some of these other teams in the division. Look, they're playing ball too. Got to give my kudos where I can. So I love football, and it's not just a purple thing, even though I do enjoy watching me some Ravens football. Next week, we'll talk about the Ravens-Browns matchup. We'll head to the Broncos game and see what the Ravens stand as far as the AFC North as the season reaches the midpoint. I mean, we're almost at the 10-week mark, closing in on that, and that's when I usually have a pretty good understanding about where these teams lie in the NFL. See you next week, guys.